This is my last video of the NFL offseason. We're just a couple days out from Ravens Chiefs to kick things off, and I imagine some of you are just emerging from a summer hibernation to set your week one lineups. So I thought it would be a good idea to break down some of the most important things that I noticed about this NFL preseason, talk about everything from a dynasty perspective, and along the way, maybe mix in a few of my hot takes for the 2024 fantasy season. My name is Paul. This is Pure Potential. Let's get into it. Before we get started, just a few things that you should know. Number one, this is super important. If you don't subscribe to this channel, you will lose all of your week one fantasy football matchups. Look, I don't make the rules. I'm just trying to help you out here, but you should subscribe anyway if you're interested in winning an all-in subscription to fantasypoints.com. That's a $420 value. I am giving one away next week after week one ends. The details are in the video in the description, so you go check that out. It's super easy to enter, and it's a great resource to help you stay on top of everything this NFL season. And it's a great day to become a YouTube member. If you want to hit that join button down below next to the subscribe button, you can get access to my weekly live streams that I'll be doing all NFL season, breaking down the biggest dynasty takeaways, talking buys and sells, dynasty strategy, and you can get access to my top 200 dynasty rankings as well that are going to be updated weekly throughout the season. But with all that out of the way, we're going to jump into these preseason takeaways, and I'm actually going to count these down. I have 8 total. We're going to go from 8 to 1. They're kind of just loosely ordered off of significance, with like the more important stuff coming later, and also with my bolder takes coming later on. So stick around to the end. You're not going to want to miss any of these. And at number 8, I want to talk about one of the new premier handcuff running backs in fantasy football, and that's Jordan Mason. He was already overtaking Elijah Mitchell to be the RB2 for the 49ers before Mitchell went on season-ending IR. But at this point, with Mitchell out of the picture, it's going to be Christian McCaffrey, Jordan Mason, and then probably Isaac Guerendo behind him, who's a 4th-round rookie, barely played in college, has been injured the whole offseason, really hasn't gotten any work with the team. So, if anything does happen to CMC, who's currently nursing a calf strain, by the way, Jordan Mason is in line for an incredibly fruitful role in this offense. We've seen what happens when Christian McCaffrey's out of the lineup, what Elijah Mitchell was able to do in his rookie season. This offense is just kind of a cheat code for running back production. And I don't have any strong talent convictions about Jordan Mason, but clearly the team has seen something new from him this offseason to elevate him into that higher role. And I just want the guy that's starting in the 49ers backfield. So if Jordan Mason is still out there on your dynasty waiver wire somehow, you need to drop a large bid on him. I would be happy to spend up to half my budget. In a deeper league where the waiver wire is even more picked clean, I really wouldn't fault anyone for bidding everything on Jordan Mason. And if he is rostered, try getting him thrown into some trades. I don't care if you have McCaffrey or not. This is the type of player you want on your dynasty benches where if he is starting, you can play him. Right? You don't have to kind of quibble over it like you would with a wide receiver 3 or a low-end tight end, or what if this isn't the week? If Jordan Mason is starting, you can start him. It's a great way to build out kind of a more zero RB or hero RB approach to your dynasty bench. At number 7, let's talk about Cole Kmet and Pat Freiermuth. I don't think you're going to want to rely on either of these tight ends in 2024, just based on the preseason. Cole Kmet played fewer snaps with the starters than Gerald Everett this preseason. Gerald Everett notably has connections to Shane Waldron, played under him in Seattle, played under him in Los Angeles. And while I certainly don't think he's a better player than Cole Kmet, right now the team seems to be using him as the primary tight end. Even if that doesn't hold, even if Cole Kmet proves to be the better player, I think this is going to be a really gross tight end by committee for the whole season. And it was already going to be hard enough for Kmet to command targets playing alongside DJ Moore, Keenan Allen, Rome Odunze. So I just don't see a scenario where I'm ever going to want to play this guy. Like maybe in a best ball context, you can convince me that he's going to catch some touchdowns, but he's just not going to have the role that you need to be a startable every week tight end. And the way that he's valued in Dynasty, because he's kind of a younger tight end, because they added Caleb Williams in the offseason, I think he's pretty dramatically overvalued. So if I was holding him, I would be trying to get out from Cole Kmet right now while you still potentially can. And then you look at Pat Freiermuth, according to Nathan Yonke, hopefully I'm saying that name right, from PFF, who does an incredible job tracking all of the snaps and routes during the preseason. He pointed out that Freiermuth ran a route on just 60% of the Steelers' passing plays with the starting offense in the preseason. That's just not good for his fantasy production. Arthur Smith seems bent on keeping Darnell Washington and Michael Pruitt involved, kind of rotating those guys in. We saw some of this frustration last year with Kyle Pitts and Johnny Smith in Atlanta. I just think Pat Freiermuth might be the next victim of Arthur Smith. If he's not getting a full-time role in what I already expect to be a pretty pitiful passing game, I'm just staying completely away from him. I've liked him as a talent in the past, but it's such a toxic situation at this point. I think he's just a full avoid in Dynasty. And all of this means that there's kind of a dramatic drop off at the tight end position now after you get past like Ingram and Njoku. It's just a wasteland. Like you had Freiermuth and Kmet before. Dallas Goedert is there. He's not a guy I'm super excited about either. And I've liked Luke Musgrave as an upside pick, kind of in that range as well. But now it seems like Tucker Kraft might kind of nerf his upside if he's going to be getting a consistent share of the snaps, kind of platooning these two guys. So I think the answer here is that you just have to go out and get yourself a real tight end in Dynasty. Like break the bank a little bit, because guys like Mark Andrews and Kyle Pitts and Brock Bowers too, who I'll talk about later on, I'm very excited about these tight ends. And I don't think that they're unreasonably pricey. I think because Andrews and Pitts kind of struggled last year, and even Bowers to some extent because Pitts was the last like generational tight end prospect, I think all three of these guys are kind of discounted from where they should be valued, especially in tight end premium formats. So I'd be willing to go out and make aggressive offers for those players, especially if you have been relying on one of these lower tier tight ends like a Freiermuth, a Musgrave, or a Cole Kmet. And number 6, let's talk about Kyren Williams, who is a player that I just don't really want anything to do with anymore in Dynasty. I'm totally comfortable investing in players that I think have fragile roles, fragile projections when they have upside. But I just can't get behind it at Kyren Williams' current cost. I think the risk outweighs the upside at this point. Not that I think he's at risk of getting like outright benched for Blake Corum. I think the most likely scenario is still that Kyren operates as a clear starter with Corum being a rotational back. But I don't think we can say the chance of Corum overtaking Kyren Williams is like straight zero, just because of what we've seen with Sean McVay's backs in the past and how quickly he can change and how much he seems to want to lean on one player. Like the second that becomes Blake Corum, there's no investment behind Kyren where they have to make him the guy. And when you look at other running backs in his range, he just feels like clearly the most fragile bet. Like he's going around guys like Travis Etienne, Saquon Barkley, Kenneth Walker, Isaiah Pacheco, James Cook. I just think all those players are either better running backs, they have less competition, or some combination of the two. And I would just rather invest in those players rather than Kyren Williams. I know we saw the ceiling from him. I know he outscored those guys last year, but they're going to use Corum in some capacity. And Kyren's whole thing is like being able to consolidate all of the touches. Like that's how he got there last season. So even if they're just rotating Corum in every third drive, every fourth drive, that's still going to hurt his upside and probably prevent him from reaching the heights we saw last season. And number 5, let's talk about Samaje Perine and what his departure from Denver means for the other running backs in this backfield. Last season, Samaje Perine played 34% of the snaps, and he actually had an 11% target share for the Broncos. He absolutely dominated the long down and distance snaps, the 2-minute drill snaps for this team. He played a very specialized role. And now we don't really know who's going to fill that void because Javonte Williams has never been a third down guy. He has always been more of a 2-down back who gets a lot of targets on early downs. Jaleel McLaughlin seems like a logical fit for that type of work, just given his size and his pass catching ability. But as a smaller back, he's had some trouble with pass protection. Like he's much, much smaller than Samaje Perine. So it kind of depends what they want to prioritize out of that position. And then you've got Audric Estime, who does have the size, but the team does seem concerned with his pass catching and his pass protection right now. One of the Broncos beat writers was quoted as saying that the team sees Estime as a 3-down back if he can smooth out some rough edges as a receiver and get more consistent in pass protection. So that doesn't really sound to me like a guy who's going to be handling the full Samaje Perine role from week 1. But again, I don't know which of these backs it's going to be. What I do know is that the Denver backfield under Sean Payton is just going to be a gold mine for fantasy production. As a whole, they're just going to get a ton of targets. They're going to get a ton of carries. There will be a lot of running back fantasy points to go around in Denver. And I don't think any of these 3 backs are cost prohibitive in Dynasty. So I would be looking to invest in all 3 of these guys in Dynasty, not necessarily like on the same team, but I'm totally happy to add Javonte Williams or Jaleel McLaughlin or Audric Estime, wherever the price is best. At number 4, I want to talk about a player who didn't actually play in NFL preseason, but the fact that he didn't play, I take as kind of a good sign, and that's Kenneth Walker for the Seattle Seahawks. Now, Zach Charbonnet did only play 1 or 2 drives this preseason as well, so it's not like we can glean a whole lot from the fact that Walker sat out, but there has been a steady drumbeat for him all offseason, with the coaches making comments like this from Ryan Grubb, who said, I think he gets better every single day. I think the sky's the limit for him. I think he's a really, really talented, powerful back that's a true three-tool guy. He's electric out of the backfield as a pass catcher. That last bit is crucial because what we've seen from Kenneth Walker so far in his career is that he is a very good rusher. He's capable of breaking off big runs. The only thing that's been missing from his game in terms of fantasy upside is pass catching. Now, part of that's probably on him as a player. He wasn't really used that way in college, but part of that's just the coaching staff, the scheme. This is a new coaching staff. Mike McDonald is now the head coach. Now we have Ryan Grubb at offensive coordinator. If those guys want to use Walker in a pass catching role, there's nothing precluding them from doing that. Right. It's not that Zach Charbonnet is a particularly special receiver either. So I'm starting to come around on the idea that Walker has some legitimate upside in this backfield. He isn't like a special route runner or anything, but like I said, he's super explosive. He's the kind of guy that you want to get the ball in his hands in space. Honestly, I think he's kind of similar to Saquon Barkley in that way, who's a guy who's also never really been a special talent as a receiver. It's more so what he can do once the ball's already in his hands. And on top of all this, I think the team's just going to be a lot better in 2024. Like, they've been near the bottom of the league in plays run most of Pete Carroll's tenure. And I think that's going to change. I think there's going to be more scoring opportunities this season. So I'm just excited about Walker. And all this to say, I'm in on him at his RB11 price tag in Dynasty. If you can get him for like late first value, I think he is a good option where he has a pretty safe floor due to his talent and his age, where there's also maybe this untapped ceiling as well. And at number 3 on our list of takeaways from this NFL preseason, I think the Jaguars are going to be the breakout offense this season. Every year we see some middling offense break into that upper echelon of NFL offenses, and usually it's spurred by quarterback play. Now, this is admittedly a little bit vibes based, but I just love everything we've seen out of the Jaguars this offseason. For what it's worth, the starters only played 4 drives in the preseason. 3 of those drives ended in touchdowns. The other one ended in enemy territory on a failed 4th down conversion. So not that that means a whole lot, but the offense was certainly firing on all cylinders this preseason. And I think they just have all the pieces, right? Rookie Brian Thomas could be a huge factor here for the offense taking this next step, because all of the buzz out of training camp and in preseason has been positive about Brian Thomas, that he can step into that Calvin Ridley role and actually play it the way that they wanted to play it last year. He actually has the physical tools to do the things they were asking Ridley to do, to play on the line, to beat press coverage, that sort of thing. And then they brought in Gabe Davis, who's going to stretch the field in that Zay Jones role from last year. And I know that Gabe Davis has been the butt of a lot of jokes in the fantasy football world, but the truth is that he actually has valuable real life skills, real NFL skills that can stretch a defense in a way that I don't really think 2023 Zay Jones was capable of doing. And then outside of those two guys, you're going to have Christian Kirk and Evan Ingram working the underneath areas of the field. You've got Travis Etienne in the backfield. And then the key to everything, obviously, is the quarterback position. I allow myself very few ball knower takes as an analyst. I try to rely on hard data, but I do think the quarterback position can be really tricky at times. And I genuinely just think that Trevor Lawrence is an elite quarterback. I think he's been really unlucky in his career, but I think he has all the tools, and I feel like the stars have aligned for this team to finally break out. So I just want to invest in pieces from this offense. Trevor Lawrence especially, who I think has been undervalued all offseason as a round 3 startup pick. That's a guy that I want to get on my Superflex teams. And then, like I mentioned, Brian Thomas is getting all the good buzz. As a rookie, he has so much potential to gain value. If he's able to emerge as the number 1 target for Trevor Lawrence, that's going to be absolutely huge for his dynasty value. I wasn't crazy about him as a prospect, but there's certainly enough there that you can paint a picture. 1st round pick, early declare. He had a super efficient junior season. So I've come around on him as a guy I'm actually trying to buy some more shares of before the season starts, because I think it could just come very quickly where he's immediately like a top 15, top 18 dynasty wide receiver. And then Travis Etienne, I think, top 5 type of season is still squarely within the range of outcomes. Like, he could just score a lot of touchdowns. He could get back to the type of efficiency that we saw from him in 2022. And he's still a capable receiving back as well. And I'm not saying all of these players are going to hit their absolute ceiling at the same time. I'm just saying that this is an offense I want to invest in, because if it hits to the degree that I think it can hit, then really all of the pieces in it are undervalued. At number 2 on the list, I want to talk about Nico Collins' route participation in the preseason. So last season, Nico Collins only ran 66% of the routes for the Texans. but he had a 28% targets per route run, and he had an astonishing 3.37 yards per route run, which was second among all wide receivers behind only Tyreek Hill. But according to Nathan Yonke of PFF, Nico Collins played 21 of a possible 23 snaps with the starters. Diggs played 18 and Dell played 14. So Nico operated as the de facto wide receiver one for this team in the preseason. That's not to say those other two guys aren't going to be heavily involved, that they're not going to see plenty of targets as well. But I think Nico Collins might still be underrated. Like I said, historically good yards per out run last season. He also ranked 94th percentile versus man coverage and 96th percentile versus press coverage, according to Matt Harmon's reception perception. He got a massive 3-year, $72 million contract this offseason. He's just entering his prime as a 25-year-old wide receiver, and he is tied to CJ Stroud for the foreseeable future. So there's an incredibly high floor for Nico Collins, and I think the ceiling is maybe what's being undersold right now. I think he legitimately has outs to a top 5 type of season. You know, if CJ Stroud can take that next step, if he can become one of those guys that's leading the league in passing yards and passing touchdowns, which I absolutely believe that he can, there's no reason why Nico Collins, with the type of peripherals that he flashed last year and this new role in the offense as kind of an every down player, there's no reason why he can't finish as a top 5 wide receiver. So he's kind of my favorite wide receiver to buy in Dynasty right now. Like if I'm not going all the way up to the top tier, to the AJ Brown, Garrett Wilson type of guys, it's really Nico Collins and Rashee Rice is like the two guys that I'm really sending out a lot of offers for right now. And finally, my number one Dynasty takeaway from the NFL preseason is that Brock Bowers could break fantasy football. According to Nathan Yonke, Brock Bowers played 11 of 14 snaps on the Raiders' first drive of their first preseason game. This included snaps at tight end, at fullback, in the slot, and out wide. Now, that was the last time Brock Bowers played in the preseason because he was dealing with a foot injury. Should be fine for week 1, but he didn't play in preseason week 2 or week 3. But just from that small sampling of snaps, I am so in on Brock Bowers. Clearly, this team knows that Brock Bowers is a tremendous athlete. He is a weapon that can be deployed all over the field. And unlike other gadget players who like have these pigeonholed roles, he can play traditional tight end, but they're trying to get him involved in all these other ways. So I know they're going to be prioritizing putting the ball in his hands. I think it's really unlikely Devontae Adams is still on this team next year. So you could see Brock Bowers have a strong rookie season and then step into 2025 as the undisputed top target on this team. And I think that'll be enough to make him the tight end 1 overall in Dynasty. Now, Jacob Sanderson already beat me to this take on Dynasty Points last week. Great podcast on the Fantasy Points YouTube channel that you should check out. But I'm going to plant that same flag. I think Brock Bowers will be the tight end 1 in Dynasty at this time next year. And that's it for today. That puts a nice little bow on the NFL preseason. If you found this video helpful, please consider subscribing. I will be back each and every week of this NFL season with more Dynasty content for you, going over more important takeaways, buys and sells, and of course, my bread and butter Dynasty strategy. One more time, go check out the video in the description if you're interested in winning a $420 all-in subscription to fantasypoints.com, and hit the join button if you want to become a YouTube member. You can get access to my weekly live streams all year long and my top 200 Dynasty rankings as well. I wish you the very best of luck in week 1, unless you happen to be playing against me, and I will see you guys next time.